Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take a huge stack of research, articles, and reports and just distill it all down into the knowledge you need to be instantly well-informed. So if you're learning English as a foreign language, an EFL learner, you know this frustration better than anyone. You can pass any grammar exam we throw at you, but when it's time to actually, open your mouth and speak, everything just grinds to a halt. That feeling of fluency, that ability to communicate smoothly without translating in your head, it's often the single hardest skill. Sometimes even after years of study. It feels like hitting a glass wall. Today, we're taking on that glass wall. Our sources are a collection of recent research reports from contexts as diverse as Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, and universities all over the world. And these sources give us the hard data on what stops people, but also some really surprising examples of how successful students actually cope.
And our mission today is to give you the ultimate roadmap. This deep dive will uncover the specific linguistic, systemic, and crucially, the psychological walls that learners hit again and again. Then we'll lay out the most effective, evidence-based strategies to get over them. So if fluency feels out of reach, this is your shortcut to understanding why and what you can do differently starting today.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with the foundational issues. We have to look at the cold, hard facts about the barriers before we can figure out how to jump over them.
Absolutely. And when researchers asked learners to rank their challenges, a very clear hierarchy emerged. And what's interesting is that the things that feel biggest in the moment, like pronunciation, they weren't actually the highest ranked barriers. The single most obstructive factor, and this was consistent across multiple studies, was limited vocabulary.
Not grammar, but just not having the words.
Exactly. It wasn't a minor issue. In the data, it completely dwarfed everything else. Learners just run out of words to express their thoughts, and that forces them to stop, hesitate, and, mentally scramble.
That's a huge insight. If your word bank is too small, perfect grammar won't save the conversation. So what came next?
Right behind that were the practical things. The number 2 barrier was pretty simple, a lack of practicing speech, just not enough time actually talking. And number 3 was limited exposure to receptive skills. So not enough rich input from listening and reading. The research is clear. If you don't have the words and you don't use the words, nothing else really matters as much.
I can see how that immediately points to a systemic problem. I'm thinking of the research from the education system in Bangladesh, where they were explicit about where the fault lies. It's not just the learner. The sister itself is a huge part of the difficulty.
Precisely. Systemic failure is a massive accelerant for these barriers. The data showed that poor teaching methods account for a staggering 30% of the difficulty.
30%, wow.
Yeah, and then lack of practice adds another 25%, and that psychological fear we're going to get to adds 20%. The curriculum itself is part of the problem.
So what's actually happening in those classrooms? What does that misalignment look like?
Well, it boils down to prioritizing form over function. Traditional teaching focuses so intensely on rote memorization, drills, and passing exams that are almost all based on grammar rules. You might spend years learning the difference between, say, the past perfect and the past continuous tense.
Right.
But then a teacher gives you a prompt like, describe your favorite childhood memory, and the second you make a tiny grammatical error, they correct you. The focus shifts from communication to just flawless performance.
So you learn about the language, but you never really learn to use it.
Exactly. That institutional focus on accuracy is what stifles fluency, even after a decade of instruction.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And if the system never forces you to use the language automatically, you fall back on brute force. Which brings us to this massive cognitive barrier that every learner struggles with, the barrier of mental translation.
Oh, this is the enemy of fluency.
Yeah.
Mental translation is that process where you think in your native language, your L1, translate it word by word, apply the L2 grammar rules, all before a single sound comes out. It's a guaranteed fluency killer.
And the result of that is just brutal on the brain.
It leads to what we call cognitive overload. Think of your working memory like a computer's RAM. When you're mentally translating, you're running 3 or 4 heavy programs at the same time.
Okay.
Your brain's resources get completely drained by those mechanics, and when all your mental energy is spent just translating, you have nothing left for the higher order stuff, like maintaining rhythm or choosing the right word.
So the output is just slow.
Slow, poorly constructed, full of awkward pauses. Sometimes the sentence just falls apart halfway through because you've lost the thread.
And it's not just the words that break down, it's the music of the language, too. We have to talk about prosody. The rhythm, the stress, the intonation. This is a huge concept. English is a stress-timed language. That means the rhythm is created by the time between the stressed syllables, no matter how many unstressed syllables you squish in between.
And if your native language is syllable timed like Spanish or French, where every syllable gets roughly equal weight, and you carry that rhythm over into English, your speech just immediately sounds artificial.
What did the research call it?
The research described it as sounding robotic and choppy. This failure to master the prosody disrupts communication, even if your grammar is perfect. The listener has to work so much harder to decode what you're saying.
Okay, so if the mechanics, the words, the rhythm, the system are all setting the learner up for failure, that has to feed directly into the one thing students fear the most, the inner game. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the psychological side, which students overwhelmingly agree is a major blockade. In one survey, it was nearly 80% of participants.
Yeah, the research consistently points to four main psychological barriers: language anxiety, lack of confidence, fear of negative evaluation, and motivation issues. And when you drill down into what students actually say, the ranking is undeniable. Fear of making mistakes was the highest psychological barrier by a lot. This one fear outweighs general anxiety, lack of confidence, even shyness. It is the critical bottleneck.
And the source of that fear is so acutely social, it's actually kind of heartbreaking. Students report being terrified of being laughed at, mocked by their peers, or judged by the teacher. I remember one student comment. They said they avoid speaking English entirely because their classmates laugh if they get it wrong, so they just stay quiet. And that one line, they just stay quiet, that puts a face on the data. It's devastating because silence guarantees zero progress.
It is genuinely debilitating. And these feelings don't just affect your performance in class, they impact your overall well-being. Academically, anxiety just consumes your mental resources. It hinders your concentration. Socially, it forces isolation. It can lead to detachment and leave the learner feeling really down. It becomes this vicious cycle. The fear stops you from practicing, and the lack of practice reinforces the fear.
And to understand this inner game, we need to touch on this fascinating concept called language ego. The research points to a weird paradox here. A high language ego can actually be negatively correlated with your willingness to speak.
Exactly. Why would confidence make you speak less? It's because students with a high ego are so reluctant to take risks. They're afraid of losing face.
Ah, I see.
They're used to being articulate and clever in their native language, and they are terrified of speaking as an infant in the new one. It's a clash between who they are and who they want to be.
So we're not talking about self-worth, but more like a tolerance for vulnerability. The students with a lower language ego, who are less worried about a perfect performance, have a higher tolerance for mistakes.
And consequently, they're more likely to speak up, errors and all. It's about being okay with sounding a little stupid for 5 minutes so you can sound fluent in 5 months.
So let's pivot. Let's move from dissecting the problem to building the solution. We know the core issues are vocabulary, practice, mental translation, and this paralyzing fear. What are the strategies that people who do achieve fluency use?
The solutions are often surprisingly social and metacognitive. The research highlighted 2 strategies as the most effective. First, socializing with fluent speakers, just forcing yourself to communicate in a low-stakes environment. And second, the intellectual technique of organizing ideas in advance.
That's a great one.
It's a brilliant metacognitive strategy that directly attacks that cognitive overload we talked about. It lets you preload the structure in your head before you even try to speak. Other effective strategies were studying a topic you'll discuss and getting structured feedback from experts.
And it's also important to see what students actually do to cope in the moment. The coping mechanisms they report are often defensive, but they're instructive. To deal with the anxiety, they say they pretend not to be panicked, they make jokes, ask friends for help, prepare a lot beforehand, and sometimes just avoid eye contact entirely.
We also see code mixing being used as a coping mechanism. That's when you use both English and your native language in the same sentence. It's like a temporary life raft.
Right, it fills the silence.
It fills the silence and lets the conversation continue, even if your L2 skills weren't quite there in that moment.
Now, for anyone looking for an advanced technique to really bypass that mental translation barrier and fix prosody at the same time, the research strongly advocates for shadowing. This is a game changer.
Shadowing is, it's defined as listening to a native speaker and immediately repeating what they say. And I mean immediately. You're mimicking their exact pronunciation, rhythm, intonation in real time. You're their shadow. This technique works wonders because it activates the phonological loop in your working memory. Basically, you're forcing the input, the listening, and the output, the speaking to, happen at the same time.
It's training your brain to handle the load.
Exactly. You learn to hear and feel the rhythm of a stress-timed language, and you build up your tolerance for that cognitive load all at once.
So how would you even start doing that?
Start really small. 30 seconds of an easy conversational podcast. You don't even need a transcript at first. Just focus on the sound.
Yeah.
Then you can gradually increase the time and the difficulty. The key is total imitation.
And while that's a structural fix, we also have these powerful tech solutions emerging that address the psychological fear. Mobile apps, online tools, they offer quick, non-judgmental feedback. But the truly unique solution highlighted in the literature is virtual reality, VR. VR provides these immersive, realistic settings, like checking into a hotel or a business negotiation, where you practice with virtual avatars.
And the beauty of VR is the removal of consequence. Because you're not talking to a real person, the stakes are zero. The fear and embarrassment just evaporate.
You can fail without any social judgment.
You can try, fail, try again, make a total fool of yourself to a digital character, and build up that muscle memory and confidence that you can then take back into the real world.
As we wrap up the strategies, we need a fundamental mindset shift about what learning looks like. We need to challenge this assumption that silence is always a sign of failure.
Right. We should be embracing the concept of productive silence, or what some call the pedagogy of silence. Silence isn't empty. It allows for crucial mental processing time, for emotional regulation, and it fosters inner speech.
Inner speech.
That's your internal mental rehearsal. You're structuring your response, formulating ideas, preparing to speak, all without external pressure. It's an essential precursor to actually speaking out loud. And the critical insight is that forcing someone to speak during that phase can be incredibly counterproductive and stressful. A talkaholic teacher can completely marginalize a student who needs that quiet time to think.
And it's also critical to acknowledge that proficiency isn't always purely technical. It can be deeply tied to personal identity.
Absolutely. A learner's preferred dialect, their accent, it all impacts their proficiency. For some, resistance to adopting a native-like accent can stem from a perceived linguistic imperialism, or just not wanting to lose a part of their own identity.
So what's the big takeaway here for you? It seems like fluency isn't one problem, but two interlocking challenges. You have to solve the linguistic problem of vocabulary and rhythm, and the psychological problem of fear and confidence.
That's it. The key to transitioning into true communicative competence is moving beyond the monitor. That's Stephen Krashen's idea of the inner editor, the part of your brain that stops and checks every single word for perfect grammar. That monitor is slow and it drains your cognitive load.
So the goal isn't perfection.
The goal is interaction. The focus has to be on creating low-anxiety, high-interaction environments where you feel safe enough to take risks and just let the language flow, errors and all. So we want to leave you with this final provocative thought based on these findings. Considering the power of language ego, which resists vulnerability, and the necessity of inner speech, what is one thing you can risk saying this week, even if it makes you speak like an infant for just a moment, to turn that mental rehearsal into vocalized reality?
That is a deep dive that requires immediate reflection and action. Thank you for joining us, and we encourage you to explore these strategies further on your path to fluency.